I'll be coming this afternoon from St. John, the 15th chapter, and the 13th verse. And it reads as this: Greater love hath no man than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends. For a few moments, I would like to speak from the subject, because I was in love. Because I was in love. Coming to Morehouse College has been one of the most defining moments of my young adult life. Like many of you, my adolescent years have been very developmental. As a young man, I've had many experiences that have shaped my character, my personality, and my perception of life. It is through these adolescent years that we struggle with the questions of identity, the questions of who we are and our purposes for being here. En route to discovering our true selves, we've had to deal with many social issues. Many of us face the same social dilemmas. In fact, if I were to question you all, I would find a correlation between our younger years. That is the complication of young love. We can just about all remember the mystery of being in love for the first time. We can remember the first time that the rose of the world took a breath and released the sweet-smelling aroma of love. I found the one whose beauty never ceased to captivate my heart, whose smile had a way of paralyzing my emotions and halting my inhibitions, whose personality dismantled my ability to perceive anything else than the fantasy of love. She was beyond attractive physically, mentally, socially, and emotionally. I would do anything just to appease her. Like most of you, I would go to great lengths just to make her happy. Many can attest that love will cause you to do some crazy things. Love will cause you to do some unprecedented, unconventional, and unorthodox things. I have that crazy aunt. The aunt that always negates everything I say. The aunt that wants everything good and perfect for her nephew. And while on the phone with my aunt, she seemed to have some words for me about this young woman. She said, "Darien, what is wrong with you?" She says, "You go to Morehouse College, and right next to Morehouse, you have Spelman College, some of the most beautiful women in the whole wide world. They have been heaven honey dipped and crystallized in the mercy of God. Why is it that you continue to talk to this young woman?" For my aunt, it didn't make sense, but what she didn't know was that I was in love, and I just couldn't help myself.
All right.
I would like to ask the question, by which means do we as brothers and sisters, bound together in the domain of humanity, love each other? If one were to take a careful look introspectively, he or she would find that we have failed to live and love as brothers and sisters. We have failed to feed the hungry. We have failed to school the ignorant. We have failed to heal the sick. We have failed to liberate the bound. We have failed to quench the thirst of those that thirst. We have failed to provide homes to the homeless, to clothe the naked. Jesus said, "For when I was hungered, you gave me no meat. I was thirsty, and you gave me no drink. I was in prison, and you visited me not." His fathers replied, saying, "Lord, when saw we thee and hungered, or athirst, or a stranger, or naked, or sick, or in prison, and did we not minister unto thee?" He answered and said unto them, "Verily I say unto you, insomuch as ye did it to not one of the least of these, ye did it not unto me."
All right.
By which means do we love? Do you love me enough to preach an inspiring message of hope and peace that will cause me to live? By which means do you live? Dr. Martin Luther King stated, "Every man lives in two realms, the internal realm and the external realm." The internal realm is that of spiritual lens, expressed in literature, morals, and religion. The external is that complex of devices, techniques, mechanisms, and instrumentalities by which means we live. Our problem today is that we have allowed the internal to become lost in the external. We have allowed the means by which we live to outdistance the ends for which we live. We have allowed what we do to overtake who we are. Not only that, we have taken part collectively in living in practical and immoral lives full of violence, bigotry, and hate. We have sought to destroy, humiliate, and even annihilate our brothers who appear to be of a different race, color, or creed. We have become so lost in our own lasciviousness, we have overlooked the impoverished. We have become so insecure that we bash our brothers and sisters who choose to be of a different sexuality. There is a great deficit in human will and morality. What manner of man would die for such a people? A people who have diminished their own self-worth. A people who has lost their sense of identity. Who would die for such a people? Somewhere I read, though, that God so loved the world, that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believe shall not perish, but shall have eternal life. While preparing for this Sunday, I began to study and to read. But I began reading over the stories of creation in Genesis, the first and the second chapters. While reading over the stories of creation, there was one question that continued to resonate within my spirit. See, in Genesis, the first chapter, God takes man and God creates him in his own image.
All right.
Genesis, the second chapter, gives us a different insight to the creation story, however. See, God, in the second chapter, forms man out of the dust of the ground, and he breathes the breath of divine life into him. While looking at Genesis, the second chapter, I really questioned God's methodology. See, for Kyle, when something is dusty, I no longer desire it. Lunch was great, but had there been dust on my sandwich, I don't think I would have used it. Anytime I go outside and I get dust on my dress shoes, I have to wipe the dust off because my dress shoes are no longer clean. So my question is, God, why did you decide to take this dust and create it into divinity? Why would you take something so undesirable, so nasty, so dirty, and breathe the breath of life into it and make it divine nature? Some of you may have always had a life full of peaches and cream and lollipops and gumdrops, but for me personally, I've had some dusty situations in my life. And I needed God to breathe divinity into it and turn that thing around just for me. I'm coming to my close, but there's a question that still raises great suspicion. Why would any man attempt to save the world? Years ago, my grandmother taught me about the concept of grace. But not just any grace, she taught me about God's grace. The amazing grace, how sweet the sound. What I'm referring to is a grace that sought out to save you and I. The grace that constantly gives us things that we do not deserve. But not only does it do that, it holds back those things which we do. It was God's grace, the grace that covered us when we were sinking deep in sin, far from a peaceful shore, very deeply stained within, seeking to rise no more. But the master of the sea heard our despairing cry, and from the waters he lifted me. Now safe am I. It was God's grace that lifted me. It was what reached to the highest mountain to keep me from falling and pull me out of the lows of the valley, to give me another chance to not succumb to the misconception that it was by my good works alone. It was by the grace of God. I believe to completely understand the idea of grace, one must fully understand what was done at Calvary. It started over 2,000 years ago, where God felt that there was a need for man to be shown the way, for man to be redeemed. I can imagine Jesus saying, I am willing and I am able. I'm willing to proclaim good news to the poor, to proclaim freedom for prisoners, recovery of sight to the blind, to set the oppressed free, and to heal the sick. Not alone to be worshipped by man, but rather to show them that I am the way, the truth, and the life. I'm willing to show them that greater love hath no man than this, that a man would lay down his life for a friend. Because of his love, he led himself all the way to Golgotha. He hung himself high and stretched himself wide. There at the cross, he hung his head and died. But that's not how the story ends. For Jesus said, no man taketh my life from me, but I lay it down. And if I lay it down, I have the power to get up again. He did it not because he was obligated to do it. He did it because he was in love with us. If we are to continue into the way of Christ, we must adopt a life of selfless sacrifice, compassion, and of faith. God bless you.